Cameras rolling. The courtroom packed. The air heavy. Every eye fixed on the bench where Chief Justice John Roberts sat, calm but commanding. His presence carried weight. For decades, he had been the final word in the nation's most heated legal battles. Today, though, something felt different. The tension did not just come from the case itself but from the woman seated across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett. She was not there as a spectator. She was there to be heard. A former attorney, now a rising congresswoman from Texas, Crockett had a reputation for cutting through noise with sharp precision. She was young compared to most in that room, but her eyes showed experience. She knew the law. She had lived it. When Roberts leaned forward, his tone was clipped and measured. He had faced senators, presidents, and some of the most powerful attorneys in America. But he had never faced Jasmine Crockett. He began with a smirk that carried centuries of courtroom authority behind it. "Representative Crockett," he said, "this is the Supreme Court, not a political stage." There was a pause. Crockett's expression did not change. She met his stare with calm confidence. Her reply came steady and firm. "Then you will find that I am exactly where I belong." The crowd shifted. Cameras zoomed in. Within minutes, the internet started buzzing. On social media, clips began to spread faster than anyone in the courtroom could have imagined. Hashtags popped up across platforms: hashtag Crockett versus Roberts, hashtag courtroom clash, hashtag legal queen. He tried to bully her. He picked the wrong woman. Before we break down every shocking moment, make sure you are subscribed. This channel dives deep into the stories everyone is talking about, from viral political showdowns to the power moments that shape history. Hit subscribe and let us begin. The first clash began the moment John Roberts leaned forward with a skeptical tone. His eyes narrowed, scanning the papers in front of him. The room went still, waiting for his next words. "Representative Crockett," he said, his voice sharp and deliberate, "is this law or is this politics?" His question cut through the air like a challenge, and the pause that followed made every reporter in the room lift their heads. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She adjusted her mic slightly and met his stare with calm confidence. "It is law," she replied, her voice even and precise. "And I can prove it." The silence that followed was heavy, like the air right before a storm breaks. Every camera in the courtroom focused on her. Journalists began typing rapidly, sensing that something big was unfolding. The quiet clicks of their keyboards mixed with the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above. Roberts gave a small smile, the kind that said he was used to control. "Then by all means prove it," he replied, leaning back as if daring her to try. Crockett nodded once and began to speak. She outlined her bill line by line, referencing constitutional clauses and prior Supreme Court rulings. Her words were clear and deliberate. Each sentence built upon the last like a carefully constructed argument. The sound of her voice filled the chamber. The gallery was silent, listening. The energy shifted. What began as a test started to feel like a real duel. Roberts interrupted mid-sentence, trying to catch her off guard. "Your interpretation is creative, Representative. Perhaps too creative for this court." Crockett did not miss a beat. "Respectfully, Chief Justice, creativity is not the issue when the Constitution is clear," she said. Her tone remained steady, but there was steel underneath it. The audience leaned forward, sensing her confidence rising. The hum of electricity replaced the sound of silence. Each exchange grew sharper, each question more cutting. Reporters glanced at one another as if to confirm that they were witnessing something historic. The courtroom felt alive, charged with tension. Outside, the moment was already breaking the internet. Clips of the exchange began appearing on X and TikTok. Viewers were replaying her words, quoting her responses, and cheering online. Within minutes, hashtags like hashtag she owned him and hashtag Crockett versus Roberts started trending. What was meant to be a quiet hearing had turned into a national spectacle. Inside the court, the duel continued. Outside, the world was already watching. Jasmine Crockett began to speak with measured control, her voice calm but firm. She opened her binder and started citing sections of federal law as if she had memorized them. Each reference was exact, every word deliberate. She spoke about statutory authority, case precedent, and constitutional limits. Her delivery was confident, and it began to shift the energy in the room. The gallery leaned in closer, realizing she was not improvising. She was executing a plan. She pointed to one section of the bill and said, "Under Title 18, Section 242, it is clear that any official who acts under color of law to deprive a person of rights is subject to accountability. This bill strengthens that accountability." The room went quiet again. Even those who came expecting her to stumble could not ignore her accuracy. Roberts adjusted his glasses and tapped his pen against the desk. "You are mixing legislative intent with judicial interpretation," he interrupted. "That is not how this court operates." His tone had shifted from calm authority to irritation. He was used to being the one dissecting arguments, not being outpaced by them. Crockett did not raise her voice. She waited for him to finish, then answered with clarity. "Chief Justice, I am not confusing them. I am demonstrating how one informs the other. The intent of the legislature provides the framework for judicial understanding. You taught that in one of your own rulings from 2014. That line landed hard. There was a faint murmur from the gallery, followed by a few quiet claps before the marshal signaled for silence. The energy had changed completely. Roberts's confident posture began to fade. He leaned back in his chair, choosing his next words carefully. Crockett continued her explanation without hesitation. She connected her arguments smoothly, using examples from real cases and quoting decisions the court had made in past decades. Her precision made the courtroom feel like a classroom, and she was the one teaching. Each sentence built on the last until even those in the press gallery started nodding along. What started as a rebuke turned into a revelation. She was not intimidated. She was in command. The Chief Justice, who began the hearing expecting to expose weakness, now found himself struggling to keep control of the exchange. Crockett's calm rhythm never broke. Each answer she gave pushed him further off balance. The power in the room had shifted, and everyone watching could feel it. The air inside the courtroom felt heavy again, but this time the weight had shifted. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, steady, and unshaken. Chief Justice Roberts leaned forward, trying to regain control. His tone had grown sharp, his questions faster. "Representative Crockett, you seem to be blending the work of a lawyer and a politician," he said, his voice firm. "Which one are you trying to be today?" The question was meant to corner her, to remind everyone who held authority in that room. The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. Crockett did not rush her reply. She looked him in the eye, her voice low but clear. "I am both, Chief Justice," she said. "You are learning." The words landed like a spark in dry air. A few people in the gallery gasped. The sound of pens stopped. Cameras zoomed in. For a brief second, even Roberts froze. His expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak but closed it again. The power dynamic had flipped completely. Reporters began typing as fast as they could, trying to capture the moment word for word. Someone whispered that this clip alone would go viral before the court even adjourned. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere changed. Crockett stood calm, her composure stronger than ever. Roberts leaned back in his chair, his authority suddenly quieted. Outside the building, the reaction was already exploding. The clip hit social media within minutes. On X, users flooded the timeline with a quote. "I'm both, Chief Justice. You're learning." It was on every feed, every headline, every political blog. Analysts were dissecting her tone, her delivery, and what the words symbolized. They called it a defining moment for women in law, for confidence under pressure, and for intellect over ego. By the time the gavel hit, millions had already seen it. People were replaying the clip again and again. Some called it history in motion. Others said it was the exact moment the courtroom changed forever. Inside that grand chamber, a single line had turned a confrontation into a revelation. The tension in the courtroom had reached its breaking point. Chief Justice John Roberts straightened his robe, his expression tight. The calm authority that usually filled his voice now carried irritation. "You are bluffing, Ms. Crockett," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "Your interpretation of precedent is not consistent with judicial understanding." Jasmine Crockett tilted her head slightly. Her voice came out steady and unshaken. "Then watch me dismantle your precedent, Chief Justice." The room stirred. A few people in the gallery looked at one another, unsure if they had heard her correctly. But she did not back down. She stepped closer to the podium and opened a folder filled with carefully marked pages. She began citing a case, Harrison versus United States, 1983, a decision that Roberts himself had often referenced in his past rulings. She read from it slowly, highlighting sections that directly supported her argument. In this decision, the court ruled that the legislative body has the authority to establish safeguards when constitutional rights are at stake, she said. That is exactly what this bill does. Roberts leaned forward. That ruling was based on narrow grounds, he replied quickly. You are stretching its meaning. Crockett looked up from her notes. No, Chief Justice. I am reading it as it was written. It is you who are narrowing it to fit a comfortable view of power. Her tone was controlled, her expression calm. The crowd could feel the shift again. The gavel sat untouched on the bench as murmurs rippled through the room. A camera light flicked on. Reporters began to record every word. The rhythm of the exchange picked up like a duel in full swing. Roberts tried again to interrupt, but Crockett pressed on, connecting case after case, showing a chain of reasoning too strong to dismiss. She quoted sections, explained context, and tied each point back to her original argument. The gallery started reacting in waves. Gasps followed each bold statement. Phones were lifted discreetly, capturing what was quickly becoming the most intense courtroom moment of the year. Officers signaled for order, but even they were drawn into the spectacle. Roberts's expression changed from challenge to concern. For the first time, he hesitated before speaking. Each counterargument he gave sounded weaker than the last. The authority he carried began to erode under the weight of her precision. The narrator's tone filled the room like a reflection of the energy unfolding. Each line she spoke was not just defense. It was dominance. The years of experience, the depth of study, and the clarity of her logic were overwhelming him in real time. By the end, Roberts had stopped interrupting. His hands rested flat on the desk, his jaw tight. Crockett closed her folder, looked directly at him, and said, "The law does not bow to power, Chief Justice. It defines it." The crowd erupted in quiet awe. The duel was over. For a long moment, the courtroom was silent. The echo of Jasmine Crockett's last words hung in the air like a final strike of truth. Chief Justice Roberts looked down at the papers before him, but his focus was gone. His fingers tapped once against the wooden bench, a small sign that his control over the moment had slipped away. The crowd waited, holding their breath for what he would say next. When he finally spoke, his tone was different. The sharpness was gone. "Your argument stands," he said quietly, his voice lower than before. The words felt heavy, as if it took effort to push them out. "The record will show that your interpretation aligns with existing precedent." It was a concession, and everyone in the room knew it. Crockett stood still for a second, letting the moment settle. Then she smiled, not in arrogance but in calm certainty. "I came prepared," she said simply. Her words landed with quiet confidence, the kind that only comes from knowledge and conviction. The courtroom erupted. Applause broke out across the gallery, first scattered, then building into full cheers. Some people stood up in disbelief, others clapped with excitement. The court officers rushed to quiet the room, but it was no use. Even they could not hide their own reactions. Phones were lifted again, cameras flashing, reporters whispering into their recorders. Roberts adjusted his robe and tried to maintain composure, but his eyes told the story. He had underestimated her, and now the whole nation would see it. The narrator's voice carried the weight of what had just happened. In that moment, the courtroom belonged to her. Not because she shouted the loudest, but because she knew the law better than anyone expected. And that truth silenced power itself. Within hours of the hearing, the internet exploded. Clips from the courtroom flooded every social media platform. On TikTok, the hashtag Crockett vs. Roberts hit millions of views in just one night. Twitter was split into camps. Some called her a legend. Others said she had grandstand. But everyone agreed on one thing. No one had ever seen the Chief Justice look that shaken. The moment where Jasmine said, "I came prepared," became a viral soundbite. Users remixed it into songs, edits, and even motivational videos. The clip played on loops under captions like #LawQueen and #SheOwnedTheCourt. Within 24 hours, she was trending on every major platform. Even celebrities jumped into the conversation. One actor tweeted, "She didn't just win the case, she redefined expertise." Another said, "That was not a hearing, that was a masterclass." News anchors replayed the footage with wide eyes. One called it, "the moment the court blinked." Another said it marked a rare shift in courtroom power, where intellect met intimidation and refused to back down. Talk shows debated whether Crockett had crossed a line or simply reminded the system who really understands the law. Jasmine herself added fuel to the fire with a single tweet. "Lawyer. Legislator. Unstoppable." That message alone racked up 500,000 likes before midnight. The internet could not get enough. Fan pages appeared overnight. Edits with dramatic music flooded YouTube and Instagram. Memes turned her words into rallying cries. Narrator voice. What started as a tense courtroom exchange had become something much larger. A cultural moment. A shift in how people saw confidence, law, and power. By the time morning came, Jasmine Crockett was not just a trending name. She was a symbol of fearlessness in the face of authority. In the days that followed, the world kept replaying what happened in that courtroom. Analysts broke down every moment, every line, every pause. But one truth stood out clearly. Jasmine Crockett did not just win an argument. She made history. The story had moved far beyond a single legal exchange. It became a symbol of what happens when preparation meets courage. When intellect refuses to bow to power. When a voice, calm but certain, changes the tone of an entire room. Judge Roberts was seen later at a press conference. His words were careful, but his tone was softer than usual. He spoke about respecting the strength of all legal minds, and it was clear to everyone that he was referring to her. The man who once tried to assert dominance had learned humility in the most public way possible. For Jasmine, the aftermath was more than fame. It was validation. Her background, her training, her years of fighting for fairness had all come together in that single exchange. She had faced the highest seat of authority and walked away unshaken. Public opinion shifted overnight. Commentators began calling her one of the most influential legal voices of her generation. Students quoted her in debates. News outlets replayed her words as lessons in composure under pressure. What she showed the world was that confidence does not come from titles. It comes from preparation, discipline, and truth. Narrator: confidence, preparation, and truth, that is real power. That is what changes perception and challenges hierarchy. As the screen fades, the sound of the gavel echoes one final time. But it no longer sounds like judgment. It sounds like change. Narrator: the gavel fell, but the echo still has not stopped. This was more than a courtroom. It was a cultural reset. Jasmine Crockett showed the world what real expertise looks like under pressure. She turned a moment of challenge into a lesson in composure and truth. Stories like this remind us that power is not about position. It is about knowing your worth and standing firm when the spotlight hits. Crockett did not just defend herself. She shifted the balance of power in real time. If you enjoy these deep dives into power, politics, and raw human drama, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Each week, we bring you stories that shake the system and reveal what really happens when confidence meets confrontation. Stay tuned, because the next explosion in the world of power and influence is already on its way.